All right, let's get started. We are moving into our next installment of Leaders Eat Last, the hunger for leadership. If you were with us last week, we jumped right into the first phase of this, which was all about the biology of leadership. So let's get started. I am going to ask some reflection questions to kick us off. We ended our time last week with, if my business disappeared tomorrow, what would the world lose? Hopefully you spent some time thinking about that, contemplating that, really reflecting on that. And so that's where we're going to start today's conversation. I want to get us thinking right out of the gate. So, just to kind of put a bow on last week's conversation, we had the biology of leadership. We had the hormones of leadership, if you will, the endorphins, the dopamine, the serotonin, the oxytocin, and the one that we want to avoid adding to our culture as much as possible, the cortisol. That's that stress, fight or flight hormone that we all have. I don't know that anybody loves, but some of us seem to work better under it. So we think all of our people should work better under it than they probably do. The circle of safety. We want to protect our team from those outside, out of our culture, out of our environment threats. So those external threats that are a part of just being in business, being in a business environment, that could look like the market. What are those market threats? Are we guarding and protecting our team from those things? What are those things culturally? Maybe there's a competitor that is making some ruckus in the market, and maybe they're even recruiting and reaching out to our team members. What are we doing to protect our team from those outside threats? And then the hunger as purpose. What drives leaders to serve? What allows our people to succeed inside of our environment? So, with that, let's get into some reflection of last week's activity. If my business disappeared tomorrow, what would the world lose? Is my hunger truly purpose driven? So if you wrapped up last week's conversation, this was the activity that we ended on. And if you've come into this now part two, I want you to really have a grasp on this. So if you're watching this, I want you to pause. I want you to reflect on this. I want you to really understand, what is the mark that I'm leaving on the market? What's the mark that I'm leaving on the people in my business? Is this business truly to generate just revenue and just profit? Or is the profit really about having impact on the people, having impact in my community? Is the greater, the bigger purpose of my business simply a conduit to doing bigger and better things in the world? So let's jump into part two now that we've reflected on what happened, how we got here from last week. So, trust of leadership. I think we can all agree that trust is foundational to leadership, or at least adherence to leadership. Trust is the belief that leaders will protect, not exploit their people. It's the currency of leadership. I think a lot of times we can bypass this, and sometimes we even assume trust is just given because we put our names on the front of the paycheck. Therefore, we have this implied or implicit trust from our people. What I would caution you with is that trust is earned and easily forfeited. Trust is truly a belief not only in the leader's ability or their willingness to protect, but we've talked about it a lot in the last couple of months of behavior being a language. Does your behavior align with what you're asking, with what you're doing, with what you say your core values are? Are you leading through your core values, or are they just something that exists? It's a nice to have. All the big companies were doing it, therefore we do it. I will also say that a quote that we actually talk a lot about internally, if you've been around us at all, you've heard this from AJ. If you love money, you'll use people to get more money. If you love people, you will use money to love more people. That comes from a quote from Mark Driscoll. Um, what I would say is that money is not evil and people are not inherently good. I know that might come as a shocker, but if you've ever had a 2-year-old child, you know that people don't come out inherently good. No one taught my kids how to lie. Nobody taught them how to bite, slap, or punch each other. They just came out doing it. It's amazing. I will also say, as a leader, your ability to display that you love people more than you do profit. You love your people. You advocate for your people in a way that assures them that when when the fires are burning hottest, when the market is uncertain, that you will fight for your people, and the pursuit of that will lead you to the results of revenue, profitability, and ultimately the ability to celebrate with the people that you care most about, and you've been in those trenches together, if you will. So why does it matter to business owners? So trust is the foundation of leadership, but why does it matter? Let's see. Without trust, teams second guess decisions, withhold ideas, or play it safe. I can tell you with more than a decade of this under my belt, team members that don't have an implicit trust, a affirmed trust in their leaders, they will second guess decisions, and it will result in this water cooler talk of, did you hear what Kirk said? Did you hear what AJ is doing? It will go into the second guessing of decisions. They'll withhold ideas. I have seen this firsthand. I've also been, I'll say, guilty of it. I came into my last business really coming out of a business that I had founded, grown, and sustained, and then got it to a place to where it was perpetually spinning off consistent quarter over quarter cash flow. I built a team that was able to really duplicate my efforts, and it was sustainable. And I was in a position to where I wanted to really take on a role that not only could I pressure test the things that we were doing inside of that business, but really looking to have a greater impact in volume. But what I found was once trust was broken with leadership of that portfolio, I started to withhold those ideas, those innovations, those opportunities that may have either been accepted or denied. Who knows? I was at a place of distrust that wasn't willing to put myself in play to that level, which ultimately I played it safe. I played it safe because if you don't disrupt the apple cart, nobody sees the spill. So if you are coming into this training and you can mentally see people on your team that are playing it safe, maybe they were more aggressive. Maybe they started in their first 12 months with your business and they always seem to be innovating and coming up with new ideas and new concepts and new service offerings and new product offerings that your business could meet the market with. And now they're just kind of chugging along. They do good work, nothing's wrong with it. They're actually one of our top performers, or at least in the top 30 to 35% of top performers in our business, but they're playing it safe. You might want to evaluate that relationship for trust. And with trust, teams take risks. I am a big believer that I want my team members to take risk. I want them to fall up. I want them to fall forward. I want them to fall fast. I want them to innovate. I want them to innovate inside of a safe place. So last week we talked about the circle of safety. I want people to innovate, but do that in the context of the fence post of our environment, of our brand, of our deliverables to the market. I don't want, the wild wild west where everybody's creating their own thing and nothing is connected. But once we have the parameters, we have the mission, vision, core values, they know the behaviors necessary to be successful in this environment, they're willing to innovate within those parameters. And then they commit beyond their job description. I think if you are on this call, you are growing, you are scaling, you are on the either the front end of that process, or maybe you're right in the thick of it and you're in the grind of it, or maybe you're at the top end of that summit and you're on the fortune side of that pressure point. But somewhere along that way, you might have a team member that is on the reverse side of this. Maybe you've heard out of their mouth, or maybe you've seen in their behavior, it's not my job. It's not in my job description. It's not one of the things that I'm being measured on, therefore I'm not going to do. I would make sure that we address that behavior. So when you have trust, people will go above and beyond the call of duty, the job description that you've laid out for them. And I want you to start to think through, evaluate, do I see this behavior present? Meaning, do I have trust? Or am I seeing an absence of these behaviors? And maybe I've broken trust. And maybe through this conversation, maybe through this training, you start to evaluate where I've potentially lost trust, but where can I start to break down those walls, remove those bricks, and regain a clear path of trust. So one thing that we know, we have these signals. Behavior is a language. I can't say that enough because sometimes as high drivers, dominant personalities, a lot of times we are looking for people to say the thing that they will never say because they are supportive or they're analytical or introspective in personality type. But are employees willing to share problems, challenges, and roadblocks openly? These are signals of trust in your business. If you're not getting that and you're only getting to the very, like the boat is sinking and I don't know what to do now, you might have a breakdown in trust. Leaders delegate without need of micromanaging and they're able to transfer the ownership. One of the most powerful things that you can do culturally is have a culture and environment of a bunch of owners in your business. Not equity owners, not people that physically own an asset of your business, but they take ownership of their role. And I would encourage you, whether it's starting with the job description in the Indeed or the ZipRecruiter, the job posting, all the way through their onboarding, this should be something that you're priming throughout that process, this transfer of ownership. Clients sense honesty in every interaction. and your team members are getting assumed credibility of the owners. I can't stress this enough. I've heard this from so many of you out there that say, I wish that I didn't have to be on those escalated calls because clients only trust me because my name's on the van or my name's on the door or my name's on the website, wherever it is. How do you get your clients to sense that same level of honesty in every interaction with your team members, and they start to imply and ingratiate that trust on your team members as a natural next step to talking and interacting with your team? This is a signal of trust in your business where your clients, your prospects, your customers are physically, emotionally, psychologically experiencing the same level of trust in your team members that they do with you. If people don't trust you, they follow the rules. I think if we had a show of hands on this training, you would all probably raise your hands. You've seen the people that don't trust you, but they follow the rules because you have what they need, and that's a paycheck. That's a job. They have to have what you have on the other side of those rules. If they do trust you, they'll follow you. I think if you close your eyes and reflect on just that, if people don't trust you, they follow the rules. If they do trust you, they'll follow you into the fire, out to sea, or push to the next summit, driven by faith and character of the leader. How many times have you found yourself wondering why people are following you? And I can tell you, if you've ever asked that, that's probably a good indication that you're a strong leader. You're humble in nature. You have a low sense of ego and established a high sense of ethos with your people. If you are frustrated coming into this training of why don't people just trust me, you may have an inflated sense of pride and ego that you need to address internally or maybe with a mentor. If it's something where you're watching this training and maybe you can identify with one of these two things, I would reflect on that and make sure that there's an alignment with what you intend for people to feel versus what you sense and see that they are feeling. When we go into the stewardship of culture, I think it's really important to understand that we don't own it. We don't own our culture. We simply are a steward of the culture. Leaders are stewards of the culture. A leader's first job isn't profit, it's protecting and guiding the culture that protects profit. A lot of times we as business owners, and I'll put myself in this same boat, we can get lost in profit or cash flow or, you know, whatever those stressors are on our business, and we forget about we have to lead first by protecting and guiding the culture. How are we protecting them internally? How are we protecting them from external threats? Why does it matter to growing businesses? I will say that many of you on this call and in this training, you are in pressure points 1 through 4, and this is so incredibly vital. It's pivotal for this because your culture is your brand and your brand is your culture. This is your fighting chance inside of the marketplace when you're going up against the bigger, the 25 to 50 million, the 50 to 100 million dollar in revenue employers, those businesses. How are you competing? I will tell you that I want each one of our team members, as they come in, I want them to not only be very excited, they're going to get that. They're going to have that honeymoon phase. But once that wears off, how do they feel really about what we're doing? how we're doing it, the leadership that's in place, the touch points, the feedback loops that we've put inside of our culture. I want them to feel this is just as much all true as it is the core values. I want them to understand and feel that the culture is them, the brand is them, versus just a, a name, a brand, a inanimate object. The way your team treats each other becomes the way they treat your customers. Harvard Business Review did a study, I believe it was back in 2011, 2012, but it's stuck with me for all these years, and I've referred back to it. It's called the service profit chain. If you look it up online, it's an incredible study, but ultimately, we miss the mark a lot of times as business owners, focusing on profit, revenue generation first. If we focus on our team, the team will actually deliver at a higher level. They'll produce at a higher level of performance and a higher level for our customers, and they will allow our business statistically to deliver at a higher profitability. But it goes into kind of starting with the team as your most important asset, customers next, and then looking at prospects. Leaders don't own the culture, they steward it for future generations of team members. If we get stuck in the mindset that we have employees, and man, it gets under my skin every time I hear it. I was actually listening to an interview yesterday afternoon by a business owner that I genuinely respect. But he, on multiple occasions over the course of 45 minutes to an hour, referred to his team as my employees. And I don't know about you, but I have a problem with that because you don't own your employees. They are able to leave you just as quickly as you extended an offer to them. But leaders don't own the culture, they steward it for the future generations. If you're coming on this call and maybe you have the 4 to 10 team members in your team, you need to be thinking about what does that look like? How am I preparing this core group of team members for that next generation of growth when I have 40, when I have 80, when I have 120 team members on this team? How am I showing up right now for what I want to see in the future? Signals of stewardship. Leaders model behavior they want repeated. Core values. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Your core values are the behaviors necessary to be successful in your environment. You determine the core values. You determine what you allow and what you disallow in your environment. Misaligned behaviors are confronted, not ignored. I see this a lot of this was a small mistake or this was a small thing. Do I really need to address it? And what I would challenge that thought process with is you either address it or you dress it. I'll explain that a little bit more. Addressing it. Obviously, that's pretty straightforward. You see a misalignment, you're leading with core values, you address the behavior. Or you as a leader are dressing it. You're making it pretty. You're making the behavior acceptable, and not only acceptable, but somewhat in some ways it's attractive. And so you can either address the behavior or you dress it. And whether or not you do one or the other is the really the culture that you're going to establish in your business. Values are lived in decisions. Behavior's a language, not just framed on the wall. I have been in so many businesses over my years where I will ask almost immediately, beyond their name, beyond their position, the next question is, great, what is your mission, vision, and core values? Do you have those established? And if so, can you share them? Oh, and they will Show me the vinyl print on the wall, the framed core values. They can't recite them, but they can read them off the wall to me. And everything that I know up to this point is not a reflection of any of these assets in their business. Those values should become the lexicon of your leadership. The language of leadership is through those core values, whether it's being emboldened, having courage on behalf of people that don't have courage for themselves, or being courageous in spite of a lack of courage in yourself. Those core values need to be the lexicon of your leadership, lexicon of your environment, and an asset to steward your culture. Culture doesn't happen by default, it happens by design, and the leader is the chief architect. I think it is vitally important that we understand that we are going to get a culture. We are going to create an environment. And we have an opportunity as leaders to do that by design or by default. But you don't get a choice on whether or not you get one. A lot of times I will walk into a business and they will share that they don't know how they got here, they don't know why they got here from a cultural standpoint. And the reality is the rise and fall of a culture is completely and wholly predicated on the quality of the leadership in charge. You have an opportunity as a leader to drive that leadership. You also can be very passive and have culture by default. And that's where you end up 5, 10 years down the road in a business that you don't love. Maybe you've fallen out of love with your business, or maybe you've fallen out of love with people. I literally was on a call yesterday doing a coaching session with a company, and I just asked the business owner, "Do you love your business?" And quite frankly, they said no. I don't love the business anymore. I love the idea of it. I love what I launched out 17 years to do, but what it has become is not what I love. And I just started asking questions. What would it mean? Very similar to almost relationship coaching, but with the business. What would the business have to look like? What would the business have to be like? What would the team need to look like? What would they need to act like for you to fall in love with your business? Ultimately, moral of the story is we ended up 17 years from beginning to today in a culture by default. Now we can redo that. We can rebuild and we can renovate the culture. But you will end up with something that you aren't in love with if you allow it. So finding my tribe, belonging over bureaucracy. I will never forget the the power of a great culture. My second job out of school, this was a long time ago, nearly 25 years ago. I felt like I walked into my people, a tribe of just people like me. I had never met people like me in the workforce. I had felt very out of place in my first professional role, mainly because I was working with people that had created such an apathy for what they were doing. And to give you context, I worked in the sporting industry. I work in a ballpark. Like that shouldn't get old. Walking in every morning and every other day, you smell fresh cut grass, the smell of wet dirt under humidity in Virginia. Like this should not grow old, and yet I worked with a team of people that had become apathetic towards the gift it was to work in an industry that most people would envy. But when I walked into my second engagement, I had moved across the country. I had put all my chips on the table. I was moving away from home. I was moving away from family. I was moving away from friends. And what I found was an incredibly powerful thing, and that was a tribe. I worked harder. I pushed into my fears further. I got out of my comfort zone more. I'm an introvert by nature. If you've been around me, you may not pick that up, but I am an introvert by nature. If you look at my DISC assessment, it will tell you that I am a very analytical person. I love when people feel a part. I will say that if gifts and talents had a title, hospitality would be mine. I love hosting large groups at my home, in the office. I love it. But if you are at any of those events, whether it's a corporate event, a birthday, a holiday, what you will find is that I'm probably not very visible because I'm in the background making sure that everybody has the things, that the experience is top notch, that they are walking away from this birthday, this holiday, this celebration, not remembering me, not remembering the house, but they're remembering how we made them feel. This is the same thing that we want to create inside of our business. Whether you have an office space or post COVID, maybe you're all working remote, or maybe you've never even met some of the team members on your team physically. You've only met by proxy of Zoom. But I will tell you that if you go and create a place of belonging, a place where people can find their tribe, they can find their people. People perform best when they feel they belong to a tribe, a group of people, and not just a cog in a wheel, not just a piece of a system. Belonging is stronger than policies. And that is hard for me to say out loud because I love me some policies. I love structure. If if you've heard AJ talk about me, I love structure. I love SOPs. I love the stability that they bring. I enjoy that process of creating a place where people have zero mystery. But if I solely focus on SOPs and process and forget the people that the processes are built for, and the processes are there to help succeed, I've missed every bit of it. People will outperform metrics and KPIs every day of the week if they feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. And we see this over and over and over in the data. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's an African proverb. I heard that probably 10 years ago from a good friend of mine that he kind of dove into this entrepreneurial journey very ill equipped for the journey of solitude that starting out can be. When you start out, you're not starting with a team, you're starting with just you. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from this is that he didn't grow for a long time until he got the gravity of this quote. If you want to go quickly, go alone. He did a lot of yo-yo growth. He would get a couple of big contracts, and then he would drop right back down to where he started and just kind of go back and forth, and he could never get past that 350 to $400,000 range. But if you want to go far, go together. When he started to split the equity of ownership in the roles that he was willing to play and not play in his business, he started to see this consistent and exponential growth year over year. So take people with you. The hike is lonely, it's largely quiet unless you take people with you. So why does it matter to growing businesses? Bureaucracy enforces compliance. Belonging inspires commitment. If you want people to be inspired rather than just looking for motivated people, introduce this idea of finding a tribe, creating an environment where people belong in it. Aspiring leaders often think they need more rules. Guilty. What they need is more connection. This is something that I needed to learn probably 15 years ago, but I didn't truly understand the art and the need for connection. Because keep in mind, I'm a natural introvert. I love connectivity, but I love to do it my way. If you're on this training, you're in this call, you might identify with some or all of that. We have to connect with people where they are, how they join our life, how they come into our environment. So a leader may want more rules to drive compliance, but your people need connection. In belonging cultures, people say, "This is my team." In bureaucratic cultures, people say, "This is my job." If you've ever thought, why can't people care about my business the way that I care about my business? One, no one's ever going to care more than you. So it's always going to be a percentage of your ability, your willingness to care about your own goals, your own vision. But what I will say is that when you have team members that are showing up on purpose, they're coming to work on purpose, they have this sense of belonging. This is my team. These are my team members. Whether that's a supervisor, manager, yourself as the owner, or a key stakeholder, these are not my employees. This is my team. Going from one to the other. A lot of you might even be hearing this maybe for the first time, and you might be starting to get this sense that maybe I have a little bit more of a bureaucratic or tyrannical almost approach to compliance, where I want people to do what I say because I said to do it, versus I want them to do it and I want them to own it because I've transferred ownership to them. I want this to be my team, not my employees. I want this to be their career. I want this to be their tribe versus their job. So when we look at this, we need to look for the signals that people feel like they belong. We'll see this in the lexicon of our culture. Employees use we more than they or I. I um I think this is such a powerful thing, and it's also a very palpable thing when you hear it firsthand. Maybe you've heard it before, but you didn't really get it. I am a big believer, whether that's in professional settings or personal settings, the collective we. I don't do very many things on my own, but we do them. Whether I'm talking about myself and my kids, myself and my spouse, myself and my family, we did it. Now, truly, there's a lot of things that I have to do decision making wise on my own, but it comes in the context of how do I protect my team? How do I protect my family from outside forces, outside threats, those intimidations? But we planned the vacation. We did this. We did that. Or that trigger point might be that you address a misaligned behavior and you get from your team members, they did this or I did this. Those are good signals that maybe you don't have as tight of a tribe as you might want to think. People celebrate each other's wins naturally. Now, we have a culture that every morning we go over previous day's wins, the priority or intentions for the day. What do we want to get done, but also pausing and reflecting on what went well? Because out of the 10 things that we might have done, 9 of them might have gone horribly wrong, but one thing went really right. And a lot of times, as high performers in high performance cultures, we tend to excuse the 10% things that went right and only address the 90% of things in the previous day that either didn't go right or didn't go as planned, or maybe they didn't work out as well as we wanted them to. We want to create this tribal nature to our environment that is collaboration over competition. Competition is not wrong. I want you to hear that loud and clear. I'm a big believer in the benefits that come with creating healthy competition. But, and I'll pick on sales because that's an easy target. If I've got team members that are fighting over leads or fighting over deals that maybe they touched 6 months ago and then it fell off their radar, and now they find out that that prospect turned into a client, and now there's a infighting between the two or three or four reps, whoever touched it. That's a signal that I don't have a culture of belonging. I have a culture of competition, of backbiting, of this all or nothing me monsters running through my environment. I want an environment of collaboration. How can I help? How can I help you get better? My personal mission statement here with my family is the second part of that is I'm here to help. I'm here to serve, and I'm happy to help. I'm here to serve first. And if my service is helpful, then I've fulfilled my mission. Turnover is low even when times are tough. I know within this business builder community that we have businesses that have gone through 2008, 2012, 2015, 2018. All of those peaks and valleys in the market. Did people bail? Did they pull the chute and get out? Or did they stick in the fight? Did they go with you? Value of who is greater than the what or where. Let me expound on that. The value of who I work for, who I work with, the value of my tribe becomes greater than what I do or where I do it. This sense of belonging is such a great gravitational pull on the heart of people. When you can capture the heart, you can put a vision in the mind. We have to create these tribal natures to our environments to where people value not only their job with us, that there's a really visceral thing about that piece of it, but they value who they do it with greater than what they're doing or where they're doing it. You can't spreadsheet your way to loyalty. People don't want policies, they want to belong. I cannot stress this enough. A lot of times we lose sight of our people for the sake of data. I would caution you. We know that the heart is a liar, but data doesn't lie. But you can't just spreadsheet your way to loyalty. You can't say, well, I I have this many team members. Actually, if you're spreadsheeting your way to a sense of loyalty, you would say, I've got a bunch of employees, a bunch of my employees on my roster that I need them to show up for me in this time because things are ABC, XYZ. People don't want to be a row on your spreadsheet. They don't want to be a column on your Excel. They want to belong to something that's bigger. So this next step of finding the tribe, I want to get into some data that I believe is truly compelling. And I'm somewhat of a geek, I'll grant you that. But I think it's one of those things that We always want to know the secret, the shortcut, the thing that maybe we haven't heard or seen. And if you're on this training, if you're on this call, you are a perpetual studier of what's going on around you. You are somebody that's very investigative as a person. So let's get into some data on the value of belonging. This, let's just go into the data and statistical value of belonging. How many of you would say, I would love an increase in performance? A high sense of belonging can boost your job performance by 56%. What would that do to your top line and what would that do to your bottom line? Has nothing to do with increased revenue. Reduced turnover. Companies with a culture of belonging experience a 50% reduction in employee turnover. One of the greatest things that I did professionally was I was working with a healthcare company. And they were doing about $75 million in revenue every year. Big company, great reputation with their staff and admin, but with their actual providers, the doctors that were a part of that environment, it was like two different companies. And what I was what I was working with was almost two entirely different cultures. What we did was we focused headlong into creating a transparent, collaborative culture between the providers and the admin staff. And what we saw over the next 12 months resulted in more than a 20% reduction in turnover. Now, that may not sound like a huge win, but what that looked like in their profitability is that we were in essence able to realize over $1 million in turnover cost back into the business. So while they may not have driven one additional dollar in collected invoice, they increased the revenue on the bottom line by $1 million just by getting really intentional with the culture and the transparency of their environment. Lower absenteeism. Sick days are cut by 75% when employees feel a sense of belonging. Have you ever had a sniffle and said, "Nah, I don't want to get everybody else sick"? Have you ever had a team member that calls you and you can hear it in their voice that they are giving their best nasally voice to convince you that they've got a little bit of a head cold? I would say that that might be a trigger, one of those signals to you that maybe you don't have the heart alignment with that team member, or maybe as your culture as a whole, as you may think, because they are genuinely happy, generally in good spirits. But if you can lower that, you're paying for that time either way. So let's get the productivity out of it. Enhanced engagement. Employees who feel they belong are 91% engaged compared to only 20% of those who don't. We know through Gallup polls that only about 33 and a third, 34% of the whole of the workforce in America are actively engaged in their work. If I could give you the secret to that, um, I can tell you that having a sense of belonging, a culture of collaboration, creating a tribe that people can identify with and be ingratiated to, they feel 91% more engaged. And then higher recommendation rates. Have you ever, in your career as a business owner or maybe a key stakeholder, said, I wish my team members would talk about us more. I wish they would take us to their barbecues. I wish they would mention us when they're at the B&I group or the networking group. I wish they would talk about us more. Employees with a strong sense of belonging are 167% more likely to recommend their company to others. If you're looking for space in your budgeting for marketing, if you're looking for more dollars in your social media account, I would look at this and say, how can I drive my social interaction score with my team members versus just looking at spending more meta dollars? I'll share real quick because we're pressed on time. I'll share real quick. Um, Harvard Business Review, you've heard me mention it a couple of times, but the value of belonging at work. When you see this deck in the resources of this training, this is hyperlinked to this article, this study. So I'd encourage you to read this, but 40% of people say that they feel isolated at work. Let me give you some gravity to this. If you are here and you're a key stakeholder or you're a business owner, this should hit you right in the chest. If 4 out of 10 of your people feel isolated at work, what are you going to do to change that? How are you going to change structurally your environment, your culture? And then going back to the previous slide deck, what does that look like for your business moving forward? So, a little activity to end our time. I want you to take a screenshot of this, physically print it out. I want you to go in and rate your organization or your team on these statements, 1 through 5. Team members can admit mistakes without fear of punishment, without fear of discipline. They can sense an environment that they're able to fall forward. Leadership follows through on promises. How are you showing up on the things that you say you are going to do? Be honest with yourself. Be objective with that. Decisions are made transparently. This does not mean that you tell your team everything that you're thinking about, because if you want to lose engagement faster than anything, tell them about all the things you think versus all the things you're doing. Decisions are made transparently. We want them to understand where we're going with the business, where we're going with their livelihood, and be transparent in that. So rate yourself objectively on that. And then leaders protect the team from unfair outside pressure. I want you to be very objective with this. I will tell you that most business owners, most aspiring leaders are probably scoring between 2 and 3 on this. Not for bad intention, but because they lose sight of the outside forces that are coming up against their team. We get really focused, we get too close to the tree to see the forest, if you will. But how are you as a leader protecting your team from unfair outside pressure? And then recognition is given fairly and consistently. How are you showing up? How are you making people known in the environment? You may know of a win, you may know of an accolade that the team member's not going to share on their own. How are you showing up for the team? How are you showing up to the all team huddle in the morning or the afternoon or whenever you're getting together with your whole team? How are you recognizing that team member unsolicited by them just because you want to recognize great things? You want to be a part of greatness. So rate those things 1 from rarely true to 5 always true. Once you get done with that, I want you to be very honest. This is going to be an integrity check. I want you to put your total health score on this. And if you're lower than 17, I want you to do some introspection, some reflection, if you will, because 17 is a sign of a net neutral. This is a signal of a default culture. I want you to be very honest with yourself, objective with your team, your leadership team, of where you feel like the gaps are. Where do you feel you're strong? Where do you feel you're weak? If trust is the foundation, what cracks do you see in your organization or in your team, and how will you start repairing them? I know that this is a little bit of a heavier topic in the sense of culture is supposed to be up and cheery and it's all unicorns and rainbows. But as leaders, we have to come to grips with the gravity that we are impacting people. And a math equation that I would give you to end this call is for every team member in your environment, multiply that by 3.5, and you'll start to sense the gravity of the people that you're having impact on. 3.5 is the number of people that are attached to each one of your team members. So you may be coming into this call, you may be at the back end of this training and saying, I've only got 10 employees. What I would challenge you with is that you have the impact and the insight. You have an opportunity to positively or negatively touch the lives of more than 40 people. So as we wrap up this, I want you to think truly about your culture, about what you've established, but also the people that you're impacting, how you're showing up for them, how you're creating a culture of tribal proportion and giving people the opportunity to be a part of something bigger than themselves. With that, I appreciate you guys showing up, being present.